3 days after I told my daughter I had terminal cancer, she called a real estate agent to list my house. She didn't even wait a week. And when I overheard her say, "We'll move her into the guest room. Once she's too weak, we'll handle the papers," I realized something brutal. She wasn't planning to care for me. She was planning to manage my death, like a transaction. That was the night I stopped crying and started plotting. My name is Eleanor Grant. I'm 69 years old. Once I was a woman of plans and precision, an architect who built structures meant to last lifetimes. I designed libraries, cathedrals, even a few sleek glass office towers that bore my name in microscopic font beneath some man's signature. I was never flashy, but I was damn good. After my husband Harold passed away 2 years ago, my world quieted. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe you, it unsettles you. I filled my days with clockwork, a cup of Earl Grey at 6 a.m., deadheading the roses by 9, reading the paper front to back, even the parts one didn't care about. Routine became a survival instinct. Grief needed a leash. Then came the diagnosis. It was late August, hot enough to melt the blacktop in the driveway. I was wearing a linen dress Harold once said made me look like royalty. The doctor spoke gently. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 3. Not operable. 6 to 12 months, depending on how my body wanted to play it. I nodded. I remember that. Just nodded, like it was news about a delayed flight, not my life spiraling toward its expiration date. He handed me a pamphlet on end-of-life planning. But what shattered me, what truly broke something ancient in my chest, wasn't the cancer. It was my daughter's reaction. Monica, my only child. My miracle baby born when I was 34 and told I couldn't conceive. When she heard the news, she didn't cry. She didn't even pause. Instead, she said, "Oh, Mom, we'll take good care of you." Her voice was syrupy. A little too warm, like a salesperson closing a deal. And within the week, she and her husband Kyle showed up at my house with overnight bags. Uninvited. They brought a casserole, fluffed pillows, made jokes about how they could convert the sunroom into a cozy little hospice. Kyle chuckled as he said it. I didn't. They smiled too much, asked questions that felt like they'd been rehearsed in the car. "How long do you think you'll be able to stay alone, Mom? Would you feel safer if we took care of your prescriptions? Have you considered selling the house before it becomes too much for you?" Not one question about me, about how I was feeling, about what I wanted. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood in the hallway listening to their laughter leak under the guest room door, the clinking of wine glasses, the sound of Monica trying on my future like it was already hers. I didn't cry because I was dying. I cried because I saw something I had refused to admit for years. Monica loved the version of me that made things happen. Houses, dinner, inheritances. But the dying version of me? She couldn't wait to box up. That's when I knew. This story wouldn't be about saying goodbye. It would be about taking back the ending. It was a Tuesday morning. Still summer. Still quiet. I was folding laundry when I heard Monica in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but my name pierced the silence like a blade. "Once she's moved, we'll get the house listed. No need to involve lawyers. She trusts me." She didn't hear me behind the door. She didn't hang up fast enough. Just a pause. Then, a cheerful hum as she poured herself more coffee, like she hadn't just gutted me with a sentence. My ears rang. I gripped the laundry basket like it might keep me from falling apart. I stood there for minutes, maybe hours. I don't know. All I know is something in me shattered, and something else started to wake up. I walked into my office and logged into my financial accounts for the first time in weeks. And there it was. $40,000. Gone. quietly transferred to a joint account that I had forgotten even existed, one Monica had convinced me to open a year ago, just in case of emergencies. She'd labeled it with both our names, said it made estate planning easier. I clicked through statements, my hands trembling. Small amounts had been trickling out for months, but now it was a flood. $40,000. And not a word. I checked the titles. My house, still in my name, but she had already begun paperwork to request power of attorney. She hadn't even asked. Just assumed I'd sign, like I always did. Suddenly, everything looked different. The way she hovered while I took my pills. The daily questions about whether I was feeling stable. The strange, sweet tea she insisted I drink before bed. Helps you sleep, she'd said. Even the suggestion to install a stair lift I didn't need, and her eagerness to move my bedroom downstairs, closer to the garage. I wasn't just being prepared for death. I was being managed toward it. That night, I sat alone in the garden, peppermint tea untouched. I stared out at the roses Harold and I had planted the year Monica was born. I remembered how we used to sit out here and talk about the kind of woman she'd grow up to be. Kind, brave, brilliant. I never imagined this version. I thought of confronting her, screaming, throwing the tea cup across the room and demanding answers. But I didn't, because suddenly I realized something colder than betrayal. Monica and Kyle weren't waiting for me to die. They were speeding it up. Quietly, legally, strategically. To them, I was a puzzle to solve. A signature here, a sedative there, and then freedom. Their freedom. I looked down at the untouched tea and poured it into the flower bed. They wanted me weak. They wanted me confused. But instead, they had awakened a part of me that had been dormant since Harold died. The part that built skyscrapers with a pencil and sheer will. The part that could design a plan so elegant, you wouldn't see the knife until it was in your back. If they thought I was finished, they'd forgotten who raised them. I didn't cry again. Not after that night in the garden. Instead, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, no tea, and sat down with a yellow legal pad. The architect in me came alive. This wouldn't be emotional. It would be meticulous. I made one phone call. Just one. To Thomas Green, an old friend, a retired private investigator. We met decades ago when I was consulting on a courthouse renovation and he was still active in law enforcement. He had this quiet way of reading people like blueprints. He answered on the second ring. "Ellie," he said, "what's wrong?" I told him everything, not with tears, not with panic, just facts. And Thomas, bless him, didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in 3 hours." By the end of the week, we had a plan. Phase 1. Surveillance. Thomas set up discreet audio recorders in the den and kitchen, the places where Monica and Kyle whispered when they thought I was napping. And I let them think I was napping. That's when they talked most freely. That's when they said things like, "Once the signature's on the POA, we can push for hospice." Or worse, "She's a burden, Kyle. A big, expensive burden." Phase 2. The financial trail. Thomas contacted a friend in forensic accounting. We pulled statements, cross-referenced timelines, uncovered not just the missing $40,000, but close to $90,000 in total, siphoned over 3 years through a series of gifts, errands, and reimbursements Monica had quietly logged under my name. But here's the best part. Phase 3. The video. One evening, I pretended to doze off in the living room recliner. Kyle poured my tea laced, as we would later discover, with a mild sedative prescribed to his elderly mother. Thomas installed a pinhole camera in the mantel clock the day before. We got it all. The whole hushed conversation. The way Monica glanced at me as if checking whether I was out cold. The way Kyle said, "She's slipping faster than we expected." Maybe she won't even need convincing. That was the night I knew. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to bury them with the truth. I met with my lawyer the next morning. We rewrote my will from scratch. I cut Monica and Kyle out entirely, citing elder financial abuse and coercion. We filed notarized affidavits, just in case they tried to contest it. Then I set up a living trust, ironclad, with every asset protected and shielded. But the final move. I transferred the deed of the house, my sanctuary, to someone they'd never expect. Luke, my godson, son of my late best friend. A combat veteran who now spent his days volunteering with EMTs and driving meals to seniors. A man who still called me Aunt Ellie and brought me flowers on Thursdays. He wasn't blood, but he was family. And more importantly, he had integrity. He didn't see me as a burden or a bank account. He saw me. Now, when Monica would finally try to take everything, there would be nothing left for her to take. No shouting, no courtroom battles, just quiet doors closing, and the sound of her own greed locking her out. It was a Sunday evening, quiet, golden light spilling through the lace curtains. I wore Harold's favorite pearl earrings and an apron dusted with flour. I looked harmless, like someone they could still fool. The roast chicken was in the oven. Wine was breathing. I even baked Kyle's favorite, lemon chess pie. All part of the stage I was setting. At 7 sharp, Monica and Kyle pulled into the driveway. She wore her phony smile. He carried a bottle of wine like we were a happy family and none of this had ever happened. "Mom," Monica said sweetly, kissing my cheek. "You look tired. Are you sure you're up for dinner?" "Oh, more than you know," I replied, motioning them in. We ate. We talked. They asked again about my next steps and treatment plan. Their questions were syrupy, but their eyes kept darting around, scanning for papers, meds, maybe even my purse. I waited until the plates were cleared. Then, without a word, I reached under my chair and handed them a cream envelope. "I'd like you both to read this before dessert." They opened it. Monica's brow furrowed. Kyle's lips moved as he read. Then, white silence. Inside were copies of the revocation of Monica's power of attorney, the will rewrite, a financial summary highlighting their unauthorized withdrawals, the property deed now bearing Luke's name, and stapled to the last page, a formal complaint, pre-drafted and addressed to the district attorney's Elder Abuse Task Force, ready to be filed the next morning. Kyle looked up, red blooming across his neck. You can't be serious," he stammered. And that's when Thomas stepped in, from the hallway, recorder in hand, eyes calm but ice cold. "Evening," he said smoothly. "You remember me. Or should I play back the kitchen tape to jog your memory?" Monica's hand flew to her mouth. "You recorded us?" Thomas raised an eyebrow. "You drugged her." I leaned back in my chair, finally tasting freedom in the air. "I never invited you here to talk about my illness," I said, voice steady. "I invited you to witness the moment everything you plotted came undone." Kyle stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood. "I want a lawyer." "You should," I nodded. "You'll need one." I let them leave in silence. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't cry. I watched them walk out the front door empty-handed. No money, no house, no power. They came to extract, to manipulate, to bury me before I was gone. But I wasn't gone. I had risen. 3 weeks later, I was on a plane to Florence. I'd always dreamed of seeing the Duomo at dusk, of walking cobblestone streets with nowhere to be, and no one watching the clock for me. Now, I wasn't running away. I was walking forward, barefoot if I had to. Luke stayed behind, as steady as ever. He made sure the complaint against Monica and Kyle was properly filed. He liaised with the district attorney's office, answered calls from the press, and helped manage the fallout. Turns out, forging signatures on financial documents and siphoning money from a dying parent is more than unethical, it's criminal. And thanks to Thomas's meticulous recordings, they couldn't deny a thing. Kyle tried to shift the blame. Monica tried to play victim. But the paper trail told a different story. They were both indicted. Publicly. Their friends vanished. Their employers distanced themselves. Monica's name, once framed with pride on the business cards she threw around like confetti, was now just a tab on a court docket. But I didn't stay to watch it unfold. Instead, I signed the last set of documents before I boarded the plane, converting my home into the Haven House, a safe shelter for elderly women escaping abuse, manipulation, and abandonment. It was Luke's idea, but I knew Harold would have approved. I imagined the garden full again, laughter echoing off the porch, women who once felt invisible now finding space to breathe, to matter. That, to me, was real legacy. In Florence, I rented a small apartment with ivy climbing up the windows. I took slow morning walks along the Arno River, sat in little cafes with lemon sugar pastries, and sometimes just sat still, something I hadn't done in decades. I didn't have much time. The doctors hadn't been wrong. The pain still visited, uninvited and sharp. But there was a peace now, one I couldn't buy or build, only earn. I was no longer checking my pulse out of fear. I was listening to it out of gratitude. Every beat was mine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't somebody's mother or widow or a target to be managed. I was just Eleanor, not bitter, not broken, free. The revenge hadn't brought me joy, not in the cheap way movies sometimes show it, but it had brought balance, closure, and it had stopped the cycle before it could swallow someone else. Because justice doesn't always wear a robe or wield a gavel. Sometimes it wears pearls and an apron. Sometimes it waits quietly and strikes exactly when it needs to. They tried to bury me, but I grew roots, and somewhere in the hills of Florence, I bloomed. Never underestimate a woman who's been betrayed, especially one who has stared death in the face and still found the strength to rise. When someone has nothing left to lose, that's when they become unstoppable. Eleanor didn't seek revenge out of anger. She sought it out of love, for herself, for the life stolen from her, and for the dignity they tried to erase. If you believe that family isn't defined by blood, but by loyalty, honesty, and action, share this story. Remind someone that they are not alone. And if you've ever been pushed aside, dismissed, or used, you have the right to take your power back. Quietly, boldly, and on your terms. Hit subscribe and tap the notification bell to never miss another story where justice is more than a fantasy, it's a reckoning.